Hello, my name is Prince Adams, a student of Ghana Communication Technology University. Today, I would like us to talk about attribute selectors. What are attribute selectors? So, attribute selectors or an attribute selector is basically a CS tool that is used by coders, programmers, or users to um, to specify or to specifically choose an element based on its attributes or their attributes. So it's like more specific than using it's more specific than using a class selector or the pseudo selectors. Okay, so here I have my HTML codes and my CSS codes. So these codes are for a form basically. These are forms to these codes are written to make a form. So if I open the web browser, you'd see that I have my forms, and then because I have linked my HTML file to the CSS, whatever changes I've made there is affecting the HTML, and then it is appearing on the web browser. So there are many ways to target an element based on its attributes. And then the first is, so I would come to my CSS file. So the first way of targeting an element based on its attributes is basically by giving the specific element and then the attributes associated to it. So this selector grabs any element that simply has the attributes. So with the first input with the input element, you can change it to any element you want. And then so can you change the attributes name to any attribute name you want depending on your code. So I chose the input element and then the name attribute. And then these are the changes I made to them. The border, I made the width 2 pixels, then I made the solid style, and then I made the color blue. And then I made the background into this color here, which you can change. So let me change it to red. So if I change it to red, this is input for name. So if I change it to red and I come to my web browser, you see that all the input tags. So basically the input tag allows you to show where you need to input your details. So all the input tags have been changed to red. So that's basically one way of selecting an attribute. Now we come to the second way of selecting an attribute. For this, basically, so if you want to select an attribute for the label element, so here's the label name. And then inside here, we have the attribute, which is the 4, and then the value of the attribute, which is name. So basically what this does is that it selects elements where attribute values matches exactly or matches 100%. So here the value I chose was name. So what it does is that any attribute for any label which has specifically we have the label element. So any label element which has the attribute for and then the value is name is what it targets. So over here it targets this. So this is what we targeted here. So if you see, the color here is brown, the font size is 18 pixels, and then the font weight is bold. So if I come to my web browser, you see that the full name is boldened, is brown, the color is brown, then the size is 18 pixels. So that's it for the second attribute selector. Now we move on to the third attribute selector. So with this selector, it selects or matches when the attribute value is exactly the value or starts with value plus a hyphen. So What this does is that, so here is the element, the attribute, and then the value. So what this symbol does here, this straight line, is that it targets elements whose attribute value is either the value in here alone, or is the begin the value with hyphens inside. So basically the value comes in the hyphen. So here the color is green, is the font weight is bold, and then the text decoration is underlined. So if we come here, we see prefer not to say is green, bold, and has been underlined. So that's for the third attribute selector. So we come to the fourth attribute selector. So what this selector does is that it selects attributes whose value begin with the value you have specified in here. So here I specify D. I choose the element label, the attribute 4. So it will target an element label with attribute 4, which value begins with a D. So here the date of birth. So here we are targeting the date of birth. And if you look at the CSS file, you will see that the color of the text is white and the background color is black. And then the font weight has been boldened. So if you look here, the date of birth has a black background, the white text, and then boldened font. So that's how you select an attribute specifically when the value begins with a specific value inside your CSS code. We come to the fifth attribute selector. And with the fifth attribute selector, this selector selects an element whose attribute value ends with the value you have selected in here. So over here, you can see we selected the value E. So this $sign basically means any label. So here you selected the input label. So the input label whose attribute value ends with E. So if you come to the HTML file, look for an input value whose attribute is name. So an input value whose attribute is name, but then the value of the name ends with the letter E. And then if we look at it, let me see, an input element, the attribute is name. So here we have over here an input element whose attribute is name, and then the last value, or the value of the element, the last letter of the value ends with what? E. So we changed the color to red. And then we made the font weight bold. So if you come here, if you open your text, if you open your browser, your web browser, you would see that the border, let me zoom. So you see that the border of the input, that's where you type in the details, the border of the input has been changed to green. Let's use the green element. So has been changed to green. And then so the font weight is bold. So anything you type in here comes bold. Now we move on to the sixth attribute selector. So the sixth attribute selector selects elements whose attribute value has the specified value you have inputted in here. That is, so mine, I inputted NA. So what is that? Is that it looks for the select element with a name attribute. That's whose value has the words NA inside it. So if you come to the HTML file, we look for a select element. So here's the select element. Here is the name attribute, and then inside the name, the value of the name attribute has the words NA inside it. So basically, here we made the background white. We made the background white, and then we made the text. We made the text blue. We made the text blue. Oh, sorry. We made the background white. And then we made the text. Oh, so we made the background white, and then we made the text blue. So if you come here, you see that the select box has all its text blue. It has all its text blue, and then the background is white. Then we finally move on to the last and final selector, which is also a way of selecting attributes or targeting elements based on its attributes. So what this selector does is it matches or designs the element when the attribute value contains a specific word separated by space. So with this, what it does is, so here I have the option element, the value or the attribute value, and then the value of the attribute is bachelor. So what this symbol does here is that it allows the user to select elements with the word bachelor, or it allows the user to target an element whose attributes has the word bachelor but is spaced out. So if we come to the HTML file, we look for the option element. We look for the option element. Okay, so we found the option element, and then the value, which is the attribute of that option, and finally the word, which is bachelor. So bachelor. So basically, this is who we are targeting. This is who we are targeting. So the option element with the attribute value, and then the value is bachelor. So when you look at this, you see it's spaced out. So this is bachelor's degree, but it has bachelor in it. So, but it's spaced out. So basically, this is what we are targeting. So if I come here and then I change the background color to, let's say, green, and then the font is bold, I've boldened the font. If you click here, that's if you come to the level of education, you see the bachelor's degree. You see it has a green background, a black text, but it has been boldened. So basically, I've selected this element based on the attribute value, whose value was bachelor, and made the background green. So that is it for attribute selectors. Thank you all.